Okay, and now, because on this day also this very important sculptor died, Constantin Brancusi, I thought of paying homage to him too today. So allow me quickly to review his activity. So he was born in 1876, he died in 1957 on the 16th of March. So Brancusi was a Romanian sculptor, painter, and photographer. I don't know about painter. I didn't see too many paintings by him, but a photographer he was, no doubt, and an excellent one, who made his career in France, considered one of the most influential sculptors of the 20th century and the pioneer of modernism. Brancusi is called the patriarch of modern sculpture. As a child, he displayed an aptitude for carving wooden farm tools. Formal studies took him first to Bucharest, then to Munich, then to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris from 1905 to 1907. His art emphasizes clean geometrical lines that balance forms inherent in his materials with the symbolic allusions of representational art. Brancusi sought inspiration in non-European cultures as a source of primitive exoticism, as did Paul Gauguin, Pablo Picasso, André Derain, and others. However, other influences emerged from Romanian folk art, traceable through Byzantine and Dionysian traditions. You see here non-European cultures. Why is it that architects do not also find inspiration in the so-called primitive exoticism of non-European cultures? Is a question I addressed, and is a question I continue to address. The artists did, musicians did as well, writers did as well, but not architects. I wonder why. Maybe because architects still are stubborn in thinking what Alvar Aalto was against. I think most architects think that architecture belongs to civilization and less to culture, while Alvar Aalto thought otherwise. Alvar Aalto said architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. But this is a complex issue, and I think we should talk about it. Architecture indeed belongs to culture, not to civilization. Thus, the so-called primitive exoticism of non-European cultures could be very, very nourishing for architecture. But architects keep refusing finding inspiration in those non-European cultures with so-called primitive exoticism. This was the sculptor at the time when he was just emerging from his village, Obița. It is my theory that this sculptor didn't leave Romania as a Romanian peasant. He actually became a Romanian peasant in Paris. This is how he left, dressed as a British man, almost as a gentleman. This is not how a Romanian peasant was dressed like. And that's how Brancusi left on foot towards Paris. Bravo to him. He was a handsome man, I would say, and it is amazing that this man, born in a humble village in Romania, made it to Paris, and there he became known as the patriarch of the modern sculpture. We don't need to get too exalted in the field of patriotic, statements, but the truth is, it is remarkable what this man did, and it shows, and I keep saying this to the students and to the young architects and even to myself, it is possible. If you have an ardent desire within you, you are willing to sacrifice everything to express it, you can do wonders. And here we have an example. He's activating, as you can see through a wire. I think he created a camera himself, a handmade camera, and he took beautiful pictures of his works. But there is much to say. This is just a quick aide-memoire for his works because he died on March 16th. He was also, I read, singing in a church, in a chorus. But I wouldn't go so far as the patriarch of religion in Romania says that he was a Christian sculptor. No. Or if he was, he equally was a pagan sculptor and an animist sculptor and who knows what. We can use many. No, no, he was not a Christian sculptor at all. Although he sang for a time in the church together with other very young people, but that doesn't mean he was a so-called Christian sculptor at all. Anyway, a hardworking man, but the last 20 years of his life, he actually spent kind of playing golf. You see him here. And I think this was Eric Satie, the composer of. Anyway, he became famous, and for some reason, he's kind of stopped working in art when he was a little bit over 60, and he died at 81. He had a love affair with, I think, a German lady, if not Dutch. Anyway, this was another of his loves. He brought her to Romania and he introduced her because she was much younger than him to the villagers as being his nephew. Well, she was his lover, not his nephew, and he even tortured her to dress as a Romanian, although she was Irish. Anyway, artists and architects and many maybe other successful people can be a little bit carried away sometimes by the verticality, so to speak. Some drawings. He has a very not so much this drawing, but other drawings are very they have a level of purity like this one or maybe less this one with some fragments from his studio in Paris. He drew very differently from the masters of Renaissance, but I think in some drawings he achieves a level of poetry, graphic poetry, which is remarkable, like this one, which I like very much. Is not representational in a photographic sense, but in a poetical sense. Or this one. This is one of the preferred drawings for me, for myself. I find this drawing very pure with these three children. I think he captured the innocence of these silhouettes. The African influence, a sculpture, drawing of a nude, portrait for his friend James Joyce. The abstract version, because initially he did a figurative one which Joyce rejected, and then he did this spiral for James Joyce that Joyce liked as a portrait of James Joyce. An animal and studies for the kiss, which are also present on the well-known gate in Târgu Jiu. By the way of Târgu Jiu, Stephen Hall wrote to me that he wants to visit, and he's 74 now or so. He wants to visit with his wife Târgu Jiu. And Wolf Prix also is very much in love, actually, with the work in general of Brancusi and also with the works in Târgu Jiu. He actually proposed a museum for Brancusi in Târgu Jiu, but I never saw that project, but I know he did it. Anyway, some works. The Table of Silence, well known in Târgu Jiu. The Prayer from 1907, a very adequate title for this sculpture, and a very adequate sculpture for this title. It is indeed a prayer. The Sleeping Muse from 1909. He had also the beginning of the world. He has various sculptures that in essence are just heads, abstracted or with a discrete form of figuration. The Kiss, we saw some sketches, some two drawings for this embrace, and Prometheus, 1911. You see, it's almost like a head, a very mysterious kind of object, egg-like, and then here very discreetly insinuated face. It is as if it is indeed the beginning of the world through Prometheus, who stole the fire from the gods and gave it to the human beings. But here I would add, and I would maybe with a different occasion elaborate, Prometheus had a brother who was forgotten, but that brother is very, very, very important for us today. His name was Epimetheus. And Epimetheus in Greek means the very opposite of what Prometheus means. Prometheus means the one who first thinks and then he acts, kind of like the architect who first makes the project and then builds upon that project. But Epimetheus was the spontaneous one, was the one who first acted and then he thought. So, and literally their names mean these very two opposite things. Also very interestingly, Prometheus, whom Brancusi sculpted here, loved the human beings, but he didn't care about plants, animals, stones, and the gods. While Epimetheus was the very opposite. He loved the gods, he had reverence, respect for the gods. He didn't care too much about the human beings, and he loved flowers, stones, and animals. So I think Epimetheus is very relevant for us today because of the various crises that we go through, the climate change, the melting of the icebergs, the rising levels of the sea, the pollution, and so on. So let's dedicate maybe a future event to Epimetheus. Although many artists and writers, and now we see Brancusi, paid homage to Prometheus. But it's not an accident that the Greeks thought of two brothers, Prometheus and Epimetheus. A muse from 1912, he had several muses, probably or most surely women he fell in love with, the kiss again, and Mademoiselle Pogani, who indeed he loved, and she inspired him. An arch, this is a work which I didn't see before. Arch from 1915 is an architectural element, an architectural entity, but is interesting. I admire the wooden works, the works in wood by Constantin Brancusi. Princess X, explicitly erotical. She was a real person whom he fell in love with. A sculpture for the blind from 1916. It's also called The Beginning of the World. But the idea to make a sculpture for the blind is a very nice one. And what if we create an architecture for the blind? Andy Warhol, and I'm the last person on earth who loved to quote from Andy Warhol, but he said something interesting. He said, you know, maybe we should all fall in love with our eyes closed. And I think there is some truth there, because the eye can be voracious and could be even superficial. So how do you do a sculpture for the blind, and how do you do a building for the blind? So this is the building, the sculpture by Brancusi, The Beginning of the World, or a sculpture for the blind, is a very pure piece of sculpture, indeed. I don't even know if it's possible to get one purer than this. Torso of a Young Man, 1917. I don't know. I mean, I understand in a way, it is abstracted indeed. I mean, he specifically calls it torso of a young man, not a young woman, just a young man. But the Sleeping Muse, anyway, there is also one with a torso for a girl. We are going to see it. Sleeping Muse from 1917. We already saw a few head-like or heads sculpted by him. The First Cry, 1917. The pedestals of Brancusi are interesting because he even wrote about this, that a pedestal should be different from the environment and the slab it sits on, but also less relevant artistically than the sculpture that sits on it. And I would agree, some kind of intermediate structure between the room it finds itself in or the floor it sits on and the sculpture itself. Madame L.R., Portrait of Mademoiselle L.R., 1918. So this is a kind of a quick aide-memoire, a review of his oeuvre, of his work, a view of the artist studio from 1918, but it's a gouache, it's a drawing, it's not a photograph. It's a very pure drawing, and I think he had talent for graphic art as well. Golden Bird, 1920, he sculpted 27 birds in 3 different how to say, periods and you know, segments, and called differently. You are going to see some others. The Sorceress, 1920. The Head from 1920. Wood sculpture, torso of a young girl as opposed to the torso of a young boy. But here is something wrong. No, it's not something wrong. It's a different kind of torso. Interestingly, the one for the boy is more abstract and anonymous. Here, at least we see a face. Bird in Space, 1923. These beautiful birds are in the most prestigious museums of the world. He was asked at the end of his life, or towards the end of his life, which bird came closest to his ideal of a bird in flight, and he named 2, which meant he didn't yet arrive at that ideal bird he was searching for. And this reminds me in a way of what Louis Kahn said about a painter, that a painter does not live because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do yet. In the same way, Brancusi, you know, lived for what he didn't do yet. The Bird in Space, 1923. The Cocoșul in Romanian wooden sculpture, and I think he captured the essence of a cock quite appropriately. White Negress, interesting title. I said this before and I say it again. So he loved, you know, oxymoronic expression sometimes, a white negress. But it is indeed a white negress. Very nice. Fish, 1926, a small one, and he also has a large one, a big one. 2 lamps. This is a work I didn't see before I made this presentation. He made 2 lamps, you know, they are considered Dada, but I wouldn't consider them Dada. Anyway, he made these 2 lamps. The Signal, 1929. This is also an unknown for me work by Brancusi, different from everything else I saw by him. Illustration for Ilaria Voronca's Plante și Animale, Plants and Animals from 1929. Ilaria Voronca, an excellent poet, very, very beautiful and poetical drawing, very innocent. Look at those flowers and look at the, you know, the mollusk in the front, and what are they, birds or clouds on the sky. It's a beautiful drawing, and we even see the portrait of James Joyce here in the house carried by the mollusk. Actually, here I want to reiterate something that from time to time I say, that Gaston Bachelard said that the mollusk doesn't make its house to live in, but it lives in order to make its house, as opposed to man. The man makes his house to live in, but the mollusk lives in order to make its house. This is very interesting because the house is at the end, is the culmination of a lived life, and this is not something that happens in the case of the human beings. In general, although in vernacular architectures, in many cases is otherwise, but the way architecture is practiced in general now does not allow for such a conception, to live in order to build your house. This is something that I even have difficulties to pronounce, from 1929. but we saw the drawing before, and it's a very fine work. Is it a peacock? No, maybe not. But look at the tail and look at, you know, what we see here, and what we see here are exactly those useless capriciousnesses that John Ruskin was mentioning when he said, in nature, what is the most beautiful is also the most useless. And I would agree with John Ruskin. A fish, a large fish from 1930. This one I saw in a museum at the Centre Georges Pompidou when I went with students from here, from Bucharest, to see the retrospective by Tadao Ando. And I saw this work by Brancusi. It's quite large, actually. The Kiss, the column, 1935, a fragment, a study for what he did in Târgu Jiu. The Endless Column, the beautiful Endless Column from 1937, which a critic described as a ring of conjunction between the earth and the heavens. Yeah, one of his best works, I would say, The Endless Column. His attempt at monumental sculpture. The Gate of Keys, also in Târgu Jiu from 1938. The Seal, 1943. Another beautiful, beautiful sculpture. Very abstracted and yet still figurative. It's the essence of the seal here. That's what it is. This is Cumințenia Pământului, Wisdom, and it's a very fine sculpture by him, representing indeed what we actually don't have. You know, we are not as wise as this archaic sculpture tries to evoke. The Golden Bird, is a question mark there because it doesn't quite look like a golden bird, but that's how I found the title on the site from where I downloaded these pictures. Mademoiselle Pogani, there were some works which couldn't be identified with a specific year of production when they were made. And so that's why also the question mark. Princess X, which we already saw, but this is a variant. Colette. Nude. We saw already this drawing. Prodigal Son. This is a very fine sculpture and a little bit different from other works by him, although those in wood are kind of like this. He was a complex man and a complex sculptor. He abstracted, but his work is not, and he had all the reasons to protest against description that he's an abstract sculptor. No, there is a high level of abstraction, but there is also a level of subtle figuration. The Newborn, similar to other works that we already saw. And now you are going to see a project I did myself for a competition in Japan, a museum for the birds of Constantin Brancusi. This was the drawing I made then. And it was, as I said, he sculpted 27 birds, and I punctuated these three periods in the production of these 27 birds with 3 skylights. And they had three different names. And you see the longitudinal section through the building. You enter like in a tomb, and then a narrow corridor, and then you enter a large cave-like or womb-like room with the light coming from above, and the birds in line, starting with the first one and ending with the last one he created. You'll see another drawing soon. So I wrote all his life, Brancusi tried to find the essence of flight. He made 27 birds, more and more perfect, more and more spiritual. First he made 7 wonder birds, then 4 gold birds, and finally 16 birds in flight. He was never satisfied, but this was because he had a giant purpose to express into a physical form the spirit of the flight. How to do a museum for his birds? I thought that it must be somehow a mystical place for a ritual initiation into the mysteries of the spiritual flight. A trip to there where the sky and the earth meet together. I imagined 4 sequences. First, the entrance, like in a tomb. Second, a narrow corridor without light. Third, a big room like a maternal uterus, top lit only, with the birds in line, one after the other, in the same order the sculptor made them. Fourth, an outside view, the beach, the sky, the sea, and maybe some birds, real birds, flying to the infinite. Finally, I observed, interesting coincidence, that the museum brought little by little the shape of his birds. So the entrance like in a tomb, the dark corridor, the large room with the 3 big skylights above the row of birds, and then exiting the museum and seeing the sea, because it was supposed to be this museum at the edge of the sea. You see here the section. And here was supposed to be the beach, and then the sea or the ocean. You see actually the side plan here. Anyway, with this I ended the presentation, the commemoration of Brancusi.